Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to talk about Undead. Specifically, I find the Undead archetypes from the recently released Book of the Dead really interesting, and I'd like to talk about decisions that Paizo made whenever they were designing them. I'm not actually going to be talking about any of them really mechanically in this video, but there are some overarching themes across all of the different archetypes and the skeleton ancestry that I'd like to break down a bit. And don't worry, a full breakdown and review of the ghoul archetype is going to be coming out this next Saturday. Regardless, let's just jump into it. The Book of the Dead introduces the only official ways to actually play Undead by the books that I've personally seen in any TTRPG system. There is actually a reason why this is the first time it's shown up though, and that's because just running a game where the PCs are undead is a whole different beast that really requires a lot of adaptation from the GM. And it can be pretty hard to get it right because generally, undead are known for being kinda messed up. So finding a way to officially allow for players to play as undead can be kind of hard. As, think about it, undead PCs are going to have to deal with all kinds of issues that living PCs don't normally have to deal with, and they're going to also bypass a lot of problems that normal PCs have to deal with. For instance, undead PCs don't have to eat, drink, or even breathe. The party not having to deal with any material concerns is going to change a lot about how the story is told. On the other hand, an undead party is also pretty likely to be killed on sight in most towns, since most undead aren't generally seen as friendly folk, and for good reason. Paizo recognizes those potential hurdles and has decided to do it anyway, like the madmen that they are. Let's start off with the simplest aspect of playing undead, shall we? All undead get the basic undead benefits, like knowing the necro language and seeing better in the dark. Also, they are straight up immune to the instant kill effects of death effects, and they also get a +1 bonus against disease and poisons. Also, unlike normal undead PCs don't instantly get destroyed whenever they reach 0 hit points, and instead they just use the normal dying rules. That is obviously implemented so your character doesn't instantly get destroyed in probably like half of the fights that you get into. The most interesting part about basic undead benefits, though, is undead hunger. See, undead don't have to eat or drink mortal food, as they have some other kind of craving. Ghouls crave flesh, vampires drink blood, and obviously zombies eat brains. If you don't fulfill that hunger, then you suffer the same ill effects that a mortal would that doesn't eat or drink. For some types of undead, this can be problematic. It can be pretty hard for a ghost to consistently find a way to work towards fulfilling whatever is keeping them from passing on, so it's something to keep in mind that certain undead hungers are going to be harder to fulfill. On the opposite end of the spectrum from a ghost, a ghoul can just keep a single body in a bag of holding and just nom on it for like a couple of weeks, and hey, adventurers make a lot of corpses. Who knows how many they'll have in that bag of holding by the end of the campaign. On the player's side of things, being undead isn't actually all that complex. You have to take one of the undead archetypes and then die for the archetype to really turn you into an undead. It's really simple. There are some other things that you do need to take into consideration though. First off, how does your character actually react to their new state of undeath? Not every character is going to take literally being required to eat humanoid flesh very well. People are going to change based on how they died and what they've turned into and who they were before. Just keep it in mind that it can really help bring your character to life, kind of ironically. Secondly, and probably most importantly, is how are you going to get healed? Now, this is obviously a mechanical question, but it is a very important one. Because, see, most healing effects in this game aren't exactly meant to heal the undead, so it's important to know how your character will get healed so they don't die after just like 2 or 3 fights in a day. If you aren't interested in trying to find some kind of negative healing to patch up your wounds, then the newly added medicine feat, Stitch Flesh, is probably up your alley. It essentially just allows for you to use the Treat Wounds action to restore health of undead creatures. Like I said, playing undead isn't really all that complex for the players so long as they are at least vaguely aware of the rules. It's a different story for GMs though. If your party is going to be undead, then there's a lot of work that GMs are going to need to do, especially if you aren't playing in a homebrew setting. If you're playing in a homebrew setting, then you can offset some of these slightly. First off, a lot of creatures that the party is going to be fighting are going to have abilities that are generally going to be less effective against undead creatures, since, most creatures are going to be fighting living things. For instance, a lot of the creatures are going to have, say, poison effects or diseases, and that's just not going to be nearly as effective against an undead party. Surprisingly enough, the party that is best suited to fighting undead and necromancers are probably other undead and necromancers, considering how they are going to be resilient against pretty much every sort of ability that undeads or necromancers are going to possess. Essentially, if your party is undead, then you have to pick and choose what your party is going to be fighting differently, as some enemies won't pack nearly as much of a threat, while others will be far, far more dangerous. Finally, there is, of course, the roleplay issue to take into account. See, most civilized folk aren't really going to consider a ghoulish party as heroic, since, well, they eat people. That means that the undead player options are probably going to work best as in an evil campaign, as in an evil campaign, it's a lot easier to get corpses for both the ghoul to get their flesh, the zombie to get their brains, and for the vampire to get their blood. All of the undead options generally work better for evil people who don't give as much of a damn about morality, and an evil campaign is a whole nother bag of worms for making it work. Generally, my best piece of advice is just be open and upfront with your players on why they want to play undead, because there are a lot of different reasons for it. If they're just looking for a fun game where a comedical group of skeletons run around poorly hiding how they're undead, then that is a game that you can certainly try and give. But if they're looking to play a game where they're treated as outcasts and monsters, that can also be accomplished. But it's important to know which one your party actually wants going in, because then that can help you sculpt how you deal with their undeath and how people react to it. Ultimately, that is the most important thing. Someone being undead in the party is going to hugely affect how the story plays out, so it's important that everyone is on the same page with it. Session zeros are important for a very, very important reason, and that's because if everyone in the party is on the same page on the kind of story that they want to play in, then you're going to tell a better story because you're going to have people who are more willing to participate. Basically, ask your party if it's okay for you to be a skeleton, because that's going to completely change almost every social interaction that you're a part of. Regardless of all of that though, I do really enjoy how playable undead are implemented in the Book of the Dead. Basically, every archetype is flexible enough to work with pretty much every class, although the Lich is of course an exception, as it is predominantly meant for spellcasters. And also, the rules within each archetype aren't so restricting that your character is going to be reduced to their main character trait just being, I'm that zombie in the corner. The archetypes are exactly that. They're archetypes, and they will affect how your character is perceived, but they don't completely dominate that character's identity. And that's really important. I was a bit concerned that these undead would end up, being the dominant character trait, even maybe overshadowing other parts of that character's kind of the way they interact with the world, but it didn't do that, and I am very appreciative for it. I've been interested in playing in an undead campaign for a while now, and I'm super excited that it is finally an option. Thanks for watching. I've been super busy lately, but I hope that you liked the video. The Book of the Dead is amazing as a whole, and I'm really looking forward to covering more about it in the future. I am curious though, what situations can you actually see PCs being undead working? To me, it seems like it's got to be a part of the campaign from the beginning and have been taken into account from the very start. Of Regardless of that, though, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.